PGA Nation, we are back, and we have a big congratulations in order. Team audience, you are now officially crowned king of the draft, and I'm not going to take credit for it. Words coming out of Spencer's mouth. We decided that since you guys have now beaten us, we are going to steal from you and take one of the best audience members that we have and bring them on the show so that you guys cannot draft with them. We guys can't get two in a row, but we did bring one of our best audience members and one of our favorite guests, Courtney Harden, to the show, drafting with us tonight. Courtney, how you doing?
I am doing well. Thank you for the invite. And as you said, you stole one of the audience members, which I'm almost on there daily. But I appreciate the invite, and thank you again. Looking forward to drafting with you guys and hopefully beat you guys in person this time without the audience. So yeah, I really appreciate it.
We appreciate you coming on. If you follow this show, you probably already follow Courtney, but you know he puts out some phenomenal content every week. Follow Courtney along. You'll definitely learn a few things. We're going to have some fun drafting with Courtney for the Canadian Open tonight. And with that being said, Spencer, you have your work cut out for you today because there isn't much exposure to this course. So we're going to be learning at the Canadian Open. How you doing tonight, Spence?
I'm doing well. And I just want to say, it's been a long time coming for us to get Courtney on this show. I know we both have done his podcast, The Real Deal podcast. And as you said, it's a great show that he puts out. And it's an honor to have him on this week. And yeah, you can't say that I'm not a competitive person. I try to find every single way to where my lineup was not good last week. And we'll see. We're going to have our hands cut out, though, with Courtney. So we'll see what ends up happening.
Well, it will certainly be a fun draft. But Courtney's relying on you, team audience. You guys got to get in there and still draft a good squad. He'll be looking to take you down. And, of course, Spencer and I are looking to get on top of that leaderboard and become king again. We're going to draft again tonight. But first, we're going to break down this Canadian Open. They rotate courses, so it's not always at the same place. Definitely a learning curve each week. But it's also kind of leading up to the U.S. Open, a big major. So I wouldn't call this a JV event. There's still plenty of guys in the field, but it's definitely not the most loaded field. As I was saying before, Spencer, you have your work cut out for you because, we have seen this course before, but not often. So what are you looking for this week in Canada?
So TPC Toronto, it's a little over 7,400 yards, par 70 property, bent grass greens. I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about the course this week because, in my opinion, we're playing a guessing game when it comes to the statistical requirement. Anytime we've seen this venue, it's been in a non-PGA Tour event, and that just makes it more complicated because with the lack of statistical profile, and I'm somebody who runs a long-term model to try to get as much of that data as I can, it does make it a lot more complicated. I watched some of the flyover videos. I did look into the course ever so slightly. One of the things I noticed is you have these wide fairways, deep bunkers, and thick rough throughout. The other thing that's at least worth noting on this is it's a TPC property, as I said at the beginning. So any of these TPC tests usually play in a very similar fashion. Think of these made for television eye appeal tests. Off the tee is kind of more or less in the same vein at a lot of these courses. I would say the one thing that separates this slightly is that the rough does have a chance to deviate from that factor because wide misses are going to be extremely punished. But when I ran a model here, a lot of it came down to the core requirements of things that you can see on the very surface level of the answer. So how somebody scores on par 70 properties, how somebody does from a long-term bent grass production. I graded it against similar venues on tour. And then the one thing that I added to at least make it a little bit more unique is, I said 7,400 plus yards. That is a very lengthy par 70 course. And a lot of times when you get these longer setups, the yardage can be very deceptive in some ways. And I don't necessarily think it is here because you have 6 par 4 setups that are going to be over 480 yards. That alone is just where a lot of that distance comes into play. So think of all the long iron proximity that you're going to need when building a model. And then I think where people are going to be able to separate themselves is how much weight and how we actually want to grade off the tee statistics. Because is it because it's lengthy we want distance off the tee? Is that now what we're looking for? I think there's a lot of different areas that we could go towards with it. I'll talk about how I built my model a little bit more as I make my picks on this show. But as I said at the very beginning of this recap here, anytime that you get a setup like this where you don't have data, it's definitely more complicated.
All right. Well, there you have it. We got our work cut out for us tonight. For me, that just means prioritizing guys who are in good form. We just want the guys who are playing well. They're going to rise to the occasion in an event like this. Quick thing before we move on, audience, again, you guys won last week, so you guys have the reins tonight in terms of draft order. Anyone in the chat out there, the first person to drop an order in the chat, it's going to be team audience, Spencer, myself, and Courtney. The first order we see is the one we'll roll with. So you guys are the winners. We'll give it to you. No one's commented yet, so someone show us some love. Get in the chat, put an order in, and we'll get going. While we wait for that, Courtney, I'll go to you.
Okay.
Is there anything you're prioritizing this week in terms of profile of golfer that you're looking for?
Yeah, you said it. I think it's more who's in the best form heading into this tournament, because like Spencer said, always the best breakdown when it comes to courses and things like that. You learn something each week with Spencer when it comes to that. So that's why he's an award-winning content creator. So much props to him. But yeah, I'm looking for more, as you said, just recent form, who's in the best form. And also golfers with length too, because it said it's a long course. So I think the length is a big thing too. So those are a couple of things I'm looking for prioritizing to build my lineups.
I love it. You got to find an edge somewhere. Zach, welcome back. The captain of Team Audience is here tonight. We have missed you, Zach. We appreciate the order. We're going Courtney, Audience, Spencer, and myself. In case you're new to the show, make sure you log in on YouTube. Draft along with us. The way it works tonight is we're going to be drafting 4 teams. It works like your typical fantasy football style snake draft. We'll go 1 through 4, and as we just said, Courtney will go first, Audience second, Spencer third, myself fourth. I'll have 2 in a row in the 4th slot, and then we'll go back. The big caveat to our draft is you do need to be able to stay within a DraftKings salary and actually be able to afford your lineup. So you can't just take all the best players. You need to make sure you can actually play the lineup on DraftKings. Without further ado, Courtney, on your debut as a solo drafter, you got the first pick. Who are you going with first tonight?
Well, since I got the first pick, thank you, audience. Really appreciate that first pick. I was worried of what they were going to do. I was like, okay, they're either going to take the first pick, or I'm going to be the last pick. But I got to go with Roy McIlroy at the top. I think, yeah, he's going to be very owned. But he's the best player in this field by far. And, this is a tune-up for him before the U.S. Open. He loves Canada for sure. He's been a multiple winner here in Canada as well. But, yeah, he's the best player. And you can't say much more about it. I actually feel like he should be more than what his salary is. I'm surprised how low it is. So it's easy to build lineups with Roy McIlroy. So I'm going with Roy as the number one pick.
It's a good point, Corey. I mean, we're getting kind of accustomed to Scheffler getting priced up here at the 13K range
yes.
and trying to build lineups that way. And because what's happening is we're getting guys like Rory and Scheffler in these fields, and there's a big drop off. And so they're trying to make the pricing kind of correlate. I think you're right. It's 2 years ago, 11.9 for any golfer would have been outrageous, but now I think that is totally normal. And I think you could totally build a balanced lineup with the best golfer in the world. So I think if I had the first pick, I would have gone the same route. Audience, you are on the clock. We got some of our OGs here drafting, so our challenge is ahead of us. But you guys only have 1 pick this time, but we need to get that pick in. So get your nominations in case you're new to drafting with the audience. Everyone can nominate. Just put in a guy you might want to draft. It doesn't matter. Put the name in. When that person is seconded, so as soon as that person or name is mentioned twice by team audience, that is your pick. So right now you got Burns in there. Burns is mentioned again. You get him. If you put another guy out there like Smalley, you need Smalley to be mentioned again, and then your pick will lock in. While we wait for that pick to finalize, let's go to you, Spence. Is there any reason you might not want to play Rory this week?
Well, first of all, I see the audience just took Sam Burns, which is the route I was going to go. So not necessarily the most ideal start to this for myself. I wrote about this in my Rotoballer article. It is a very rare occurrence this week where the top 11 of the pricing, so all the golfers that are $9,000 and above, are the top 11 of my model. You don't necessarily always get that sort of a return. So what that means at the very basic level of that explanation is your top 11 players, any way that you mix and match them, technically ends up yielding what my model deems to be a profitable start to a lineup. And the only reason why, if there was a reason I would go against Rory in any situation, is I want to fit as many of those 11 golfers as I can into my build. Now, with that being said, Rory is the number one player in my model. He has the highest win equity total by quite a substantial margin there. So, if you're starting with any of those 11 guys, there's really no gripes from me. I think where you can get different is the names underneath, but very sad to see Sam Burns go. That's not how I was expecting this to start.
Well, there you have it. Sam Burns off the board. Spencer already told you that's who he wanted. So steal by the audience. Great start. Courtney, I'd love to hear from you. Is Sam Burns on your radar for this week?
He definitely was. If I didn't have the number one pick, he was definitely it. And by his last name, Burns, he's been burning up and heating up at the right moment, and, top 20 in 4 of his last 5 starts. And his ball striking has been on point, especially over those last 5 starts. So that's a good pick by the audience. Yeah, I definitely like Sam Burns this week.
Yeah, Sam Burns is certainly heading in the right direction. To get him in that low 9K range, it's certainly a price up from where he's been. But for the way he's been playing, it certainly feels like a value. And he has just as much upside as majority of the guys here in that top tier. So Burns with a great pick by the audience off the board. Spencer with the 3rd overall pick. Burns is gone. How are you going to pivot?
I'm going to probably regret going down this path right now. This is a golfer that just qualified for the U.S. Open yesterday, and this is kind of walking one of those fine lines where he could potentially pull himself out of this tournament. But I'm going to take who is my model's deeming to be one of the most popular plays on the board. I don't normally start in this direction, but I think that I'm going to now at this point, now that I'm not going to be able to run it around Burns, there's a lot of different ways I can do this. I'm going to take Cameron Young at $7,500. I think that the upside that he brings, I know the lack of win equity is something that we can keep having a conversation about, but if you look at this statistical profile recently, he has started to climb back up my model, maybe not to the point of where he was a couple of years ago. But, Courtney talked about this. I mentioned distance being one of the prerequisites of what I am looking for at this tournament. And if you just look at TPC properties in general and similar properties of the way that this course is set up, Cameron Young's driving could potentially be a massive push in the right direction for him to continue this form that he has put together. So the irons are going to have to be better than what we have seen. That has been something that has gone cold for him. But I'm going to take Cameron Young here. I think it's a very safe way to start this build. And I think he is massively underpriced at $7,500. This is not the days where it's the lack of win equity we were talking about in that, $10,000 range.
Interesting pick. Now, I like Young this week. I don't love where the ownership is heading, but I did not think he was going in the first round. So surprised there by Spencer, but I think it's an interesting pick, especially at 7,500, getting some value off the board. I am not going in the same direction. I'm going back to the top of the board here. I have 2. And as Spencer said in the beginning of the show, right, the top 11 golfers, projected with the winners at the top 11 upside, it was that those 2 things correlated in your model. I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to stick with that theme. And I'm going to take number 2 and number 3. I'm going to go ahead and take Ludwig and Corey Connors. And as we were saying before, you can afford to do that, right? You can still balance out your lineup by getting both those guys off the board. It's a Canadian Open. Listen, historically, Canadians haven't had the most success winning this tournament, but this certainly feels like the year for Corey Connors. He's been playing. He's having a great season. The ball striking has been excellent. If you look at his more recently, he lost almost 5 strokes on approach last week at the Memorial and still got 25th. His putter, excuse me, his putter was great. He gained 4 strokes putting. He's going to be good off the tee. He hasn't lost strokes off the tee in 5 months. I think that last week's ball striking was an outlier. I think he gets back to what he does best and strikes the ball really well this week. And I think he gets you a top 10, if not goes out and wins the tournament. And the same goes for Ludwig. I mean, Ludwig turned it around last week. He gained 2 strokes on approach. if you look at the profile of golfers in this field, Ludwig, outside of Rory, is probably the best golfer in the field. He has had some injuries. He hasn't been the best version of Ludwig this year, but I think he's turning that corner. What a great week for him to get right before the U.S. Open. So I'm happy to take the number 2 in my book, the number 2 and 3 best golfer in this field here, in both here in the first round. All right, Spencer, would love to get your take. Are you interested in Connors and Ludwig at all this week? And then you're up with your second pick.
I've drafted enough with you, Joel. We've done this for a couple of years together that I should know that this was a very plausible route that you were going to take. I kind of expected you to want to go that route with Rory in one of those names. I don't know if you could have necessarily fit them perfectly, but for some reason, it's a miscalculation. I was not expecting you to take both of those 2 names, and I thought I was getting cute with Cameron Young. But I think Corey Connors, just to have a conversation about him very quickly, I would make an argument which is now going to look completely backwards from what I've just discussed with this Cameron Young pick. If we're talking from value sense, Corey Connors is probably my favorite play on the board because you do get to save nearly $2,000 from Rory. And while he doesn't necessarily possess that same upside that Rory has, if you look inside of the betting market, those prices are a lot closer than you would expect it to be. For a $2,000 difference, it's about minus 150 for Rory, minus 160. It's not that extreme. I mean, we see a lot, it's a very good pick there, and it's a very unfortunate way. And I was kind of fine taking one or the other, whichever way that you went with it. And I mean, when I look at these lineups now, I guess the problem is the audience could still go towards the top. So I will take one of these top names just so I am not left with nobody here. But I'll take Shane Lowry at $9,900. I think that there's a very safe floor that Lowry brings to the mix. He's 14th in my model in weighted proximity. I talked about all those off the tee metrics for Cameron Young. Shane Lowry possesses very surprisingly in my model. You don't think of him as a distance golfer, and he's not. When you look at off the tee at similar properties of how I graded him to this course, he ended up cracking the top 10 for me in that area. And that also was accompanied by him being inside the top 10 in all of those key par 4 ranges that are going to have to be some of those bogey avoidance zones. So I really like the safety that I have in this start from a Lowry and Cameron Young build. Unfortunately, with that, you have 2 golfers that are 20% plus owned. So I'm going to have to get different somewhere else. But it's a very rare occurrence this week where, Rory's number 1 in my model, Connors is number 2, Oberg is number 3. All those names ended up going off the board, and I took a guy in Cameron Young that was outside of the top 10. So, it's probably a miscalculation, as I said at the very beginning, but I do like Shane Lowry a lot this week.
There you have it. It's all about strategy here at the draft. You got to have a theme behind your lineup, and then hope you're able to have those guys fall to you. And so, as Spencer sees having some regret, doesn't mean he still can't be crowned king of the draft. But, I was able to get, throw off his strategy a bit, which I am always excited about. Audience, you are back on the clock. Andrew, we appreciate you. The early nomination is in with Pendrith, but you're going to need one more double to lock that in. While we wait, Courtney, I'd love to go to you on this one. I'd love to get your take on the last few picks between Lowry, Connors, and Ludwig this week.
I really like that Lowry pick. Just the simple fact that what he's done, like I say, he had a top 25 at the Memorial, and he plays the long par 4 so well. Really good at the ball striking as well. He was a guy I was actually looking at, so I really did like that Lowry pick that Spencer did. And Corey Connors, again, he plays so well at Canadian Opens each and every year, so I am not surprised that he was a top pick in this draft as well. So because he would have fell somewhere in between there, I'm sure Spencer would have picked him up if it wasn't for you, Joel. So I do like the Connors and the Lowry picks.
Boom. There you have it. I love it. Audience, great job getting your pick locked in. Taylor Pendrith, good pick. Audience off to a good start. Pendrith was someone I had flagged. Mm-hmm. If I didn't land both Connors and Ludwig, I probably would have been looking at Pendrith there in that pick. The audience got him off the board at 9,600. It seems high for him, but in this field, I think that price is actually right. So great job, Andrew and Caitlin, and of course your captain, Zach, for locking that pick in Spence, we'll go back to you on this one. Are you interested in Taylor Pendrith this week?
I'm going to probably give you the same answer about everybody who's 9,000 plus. I think they're all playable. I think they all make sense in different builds that you put together. Pendrith has a lot of the distance requirements that you want to see. And from a skill set standpoint, there's a lot to like about him. He was one of the climbers in my model for win equity. And that's usually something that intrigues me for GPP contests because we're trying to shoot for as much upside as possible. So I know he's popular. I see 22%. It's in the same range of all the guys that I've taken so far. I think they're all very similar. I don't see a massive difference. Once you get beneath, I would say Oberg, Connors, and Rory, all those other names in the $9,000 section, it's kind of apples to oranges of just which one you prefer better.
Oh, all right. There you have it. Courtney, you're back on the clock. You got 2 in a row here. You got Rory off the board. You're going to have to find some value to make that work. Who are you targeting with your second and third picks?
You're right. I think now it's time to get that value since I did get on the top of the board with Roy. So I'm going to go with my second pick. I'm going to go with Vince Whaley at 7,400. I think this is a good value because he's made 3 cuts in a row. Very elite putter. His last 2 outings tied for 11, tied for 15. Very good off the tee and on the green. So I'm going to go with Vincent Whaley as one of my value picks. And I'm going to go with Ryan Fox at 7,700. I think he's just too cheap, and he's hot right now. So playing very well. I love the price. And I think he can actually get in the top 10, top 15, in my opinion, too. So I'm going with Ryan Fox and Vincent Whaley as my 2 value picks.
Boom. I couldn't have said it better myself. I agree. Ryan Fox is too cheap. He was the one I had marked for my next pick here. Obviously, I'm not going to get him. But wise pick there by Courtney. Fox is just playing well. He's been consistent. He's been striking it well. Doesn't really have many flaws right now in his game. You want to see how much upside he can get you. I think he's pretty safe this week. I think he's going to make the cut, in my opinion. I think he's going to probably get you a top 30 for sure. And if he makes a few putts, maybe he can even get you in the top 15. So I really like that pick. Audience, you're back on the clock. So let's get those nominations in. Same way as last time. We need a few nominations, one more to finalize it, to lock in your third pick. While we wait on the audience, Spence, let's go back to you. Where do you stand on Ryan Fox and Vince Whaley this week?
I'm really confused by the ownership percentage that I'm seeing on Vincent Whaley because to me, this is one of these golfers that you would expect the public to be all over. I see him at sub 5% right now, and I'm having a hard time understanding why ownership is not going towards him. I agree with Courtney. I think he's one of the better values on the board. He was a name that was going to be on the short list of options I was considering. And if we want to talk about distance, which we keep mentioning over and over again, he's top 40 in my model in driving distance. So, I mean, that's not even a reason why people aren't playing him. So I'm a little confused, if I'm being honest, of why we're at 4% ownership on him. I would assume that's going to tick up as the next 24 plus hours comes into play.
All right. Wow, good pick. Endorsed there for Courtney. We got 1 nomination in. Brian England, welcome back to the show. We're mid-draft. We could use our help. Audience needs to lock in their third pick. Mr. Caitlin has nominated Mr. Smalley. But that's all you guys got. So we need more nominations. We need that pick to get finalized. As we wait, Andrew, let us know who you like. Brian, Caitlin, if you got any more recommendations, let us know. Zach, I haven't seen much from you tonight, Zach, so we're relying on the captain to kind of finalize some of these picks. Before we go there, we'll go back to you, Courtney. I want to get your take. So far, the audience has started with Burns and Pendrith. Now, you're normally one of their go-to cogs to help draft the team. You're not helping them tonight, but how are they doing thus far?
They're doing really well. I mean, they're doing good. The Pendrith and Burns picks are really good in that $9,000 range to start it out. But now I think they have to get those their value picks. Now they got a little over 7,700. So I like both picks for the audience. So they're off to a great start.
All right, there you have it. Audience, great job. David, we appreciate you locking that pick in. Smalley off the board. And I know you guys had, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, pretty sure you guys had nominated Smalley even in your first round pick. So to still get him here in the third round, you have to be pleased at 7,600. It's a good value pick. Spence, I would love to get your take on Alex Smalley this week, and then you're up with your third.
Yeah, I think Smalley's probably one of the best values on the board too. It's been this start of this draft has been on all sides. I feel like any pick that has been made has probably been the direction I was going to go. Smalley was very likely going to be my next selection. So great pick from the audience. Really have nothing to say other than it's one of the better values on the board.
All right, there you have it, Spence. You got Cameron Young and Shane Lowry. I know you've been a lot of players stolen already. Where are you going to go with your third pick?
Here's the thing. Yes, there's a lot of players that have been stolen. I still think that constructing a lineup, unlike some weeks, is relatively simple. There are enough pockets of value that I have in different sections to be able to fill out a lineup in the capacity that I would like it to be. So I'm going to dip down a little bit lower than the $9,000 range. And I'm going to take a golfer in Alex Noren at $8,500. Number one player in my model at strokes gained total at TPC properties. I've used that answer a couple of times on this show when we've gotten to TPC properties for Noren. I don't think people realize the type of success that he finds at these courses just because of the lack of win equity that he brings to the table. And we can stretch this further than just TPC properties to where he also graded inside of the top 20 for me at similar courses and inside of the top 20 for me on strokes gained total on bent grass greens. So you add all of that to another top 25 return in strokes gained total at par 70 courses. The value here at 8,500 is probably give or take, $500 plus too cheap, just because this is his return over the last 2 months into golf. And like I've said, anytime I take Noren, be very careful of it because he seems to burn me more than most players. But I'm going to be in on Alex Noren this week.
All right, Alex Noren. I like that pick. I mean, he's just looked good, right? He's just been playing well. I think we've seen Noren go on those runs where he's been kind of an elite talent for stretches. He's coming back from an injury, but he's looked solid. I think this is a field where he could be, I don't even want to say surprised, but it could be one of those weeks where he's kind of sneaking into that top 10 like we've seen him do. So that pick's endorsed by me. I got two here. I know exactly who I want, so I'm going to be quick. I'm glad these guys both lasted me. I really like it. My favorite value play this week is Emiliano Grillo. At only 7,100, I think he possesses a lot of upside here this week in the low 7K range. We've seen him recently give you back-to-back. Basically, he got you T20 at the weird Myrtle Beach tournament, and then he get you at the Charles Schwab T16. He's looked really good, but if you look at even dive a little bit deeper into the numbers, the ball striking has been really good. And if he's turned around the ball striking in the last 3 events that he's played in, going back to the Valero, he's gained 2 strokes, 3 strokes at the CJ Cup, and 6 strokes at the Charles Schwab. He's also been pretty good with that putter. And if he finds another hot putter this week, I think Grillo can get you a really good finish. The top 10 even is in the card. So I really like Grillo this week. I'm going to pair him with another guy who I've been on more frequently recently. And he's a guy that's a streaky golfer. I mentioned this a lot. When you catch him on the hot streaks, he gets you really good results. And that's Eric Cole. And Eric Cole, it's wide fairways, so he's a little short off the tee, but that shouldn't hurt him too much. He lost some strokes at the Memorial, but other than that, his ball striking has been phenomenal. He's good around the greens. We know he can catch a hot putter. I think this profile is one of those tournaments where Cole shows up and get you another really high finish. And the low 8K range, and he's still pretty affordable in my lineup where I can still build out a well-balanced up. I could take Cole, Connors, and Ludwig and still not have to go into the 6K range. So I'm pretty excited about that turn here from my squad. Courtney, I'd love to get your take. Are you interested in either Grillo or Cole this week?
Was very interested in Eric Cole. I think he was going to use that's a snipe. It's a good snipe because he was on the radar for me too, as you said. At that price point and in this stage of the draft, I think that's a really good pick. I never can get Emiliano Grillo right. I never can get him correct, even if he's 7,100 or 8,000. Somehow, every time I pick him in a lineup, he gets cut or anything like that. So I just hope Grillo can give you that top 20. As he said, if you get hot with a putter, he can definitely give you a good showing on that. But yeah, I definitely was interested in Eric Cole.
Boom. All right.
Yeah.
I love it. Cole, another steal off the board. Spence, would love to hear from you. Are you have a take or any preference between Grillo or Cole this week? And then you're up with your fourth.
I like both. Cole is definitely somebody who's on my radar. I feel like you and I, Joel, talk about this every single week, that he's just underpriced on a weekly basis at this point. For my selection, and this is going to be like, we want to talk about Alex Noren being a name that seems to burn people, and Cameron Young, that seems to be a name that burns people. I guess this lineup is just going to continue down this path right now, but I love some of the ball striking metrics. Forget the putter for a second, but I love the ball striking metrics that I see from Doug Gim at $7,300. If you remove any of the short game statistics and you just look in my model of expected driving and expected proximity for this course, number 1, Ludwig Oberg. Number 2, Rory McIlroy. Number 3, Keith Mitchell. Number 4 is Doug Gim. You also will notice that if you go back and deeper into this Doug Gim profile, he has had some pretty decent success on these Canadian courses. He graded inside of the top 5 of my model in strokes gained Canada, if you want to just call it that. So I think this is a nice spot for Doug Gim, where he's sub 6% ownership right now, and he's super cheap to be able to very easily put into a lineup.
Ooh, the Gim Reaper off the board.
Yeah.
7,300. I think it's a good value there. I think when you're looking at the 7,300 range, he's definitely one of those guys that does have some upside. So I can get behind that pick. Audience, you are on the clock, and it looks like there is some excitement around potentially John Kiefer. It looks like a second nomination's in, so get those votes in. You guys need to lock in that pick. While we wait, Courtney, let's go back to you. Are you going to be playing Doug Gim at all this week?
Yes, he's another one that was a stolen. You guys know it. No, that was a really good pick, as you said. Upside at that 7,300. Doug Gim, very consistent lately too, especially with the ball strike, as Spencer said. So I really do like that pick. And for that price, again, 7,300. Around this price range, there's a lot of good guys, a lot of good golfers here in that 771 to 7,500 range. So a lot of good value there, and Doug Gim is one of those values.
All right, there you have it. So Courtney, you're about to have 2, but the audience has to lock their pick in first. Audience, are you going to take a steal from Courtney before his 2 go in? There's 2 nominations out there. We need one to get finalized. We're waiting on some of the OGs, Zach, Brian, Caitlin. Are you interested in Castillo or Kiefer? Is there someone else you guys want to lock in that 4th pick? While we wait, Spencer, I want to go back to you on this one. You got a little bit to go here. I know Courtney's going to have 2 picks coming up soon. Looking at the draft board as it stands, I guess you potentially, Courtney and team audience, can go back up, but majority of the top of the board is probably out of play at this point. Is there anyone up there that you're surprised has not gone off yet?
Let's look at the ownership percentage. I mean, I guess for me, probably Robert McIntyre. I know that we're looking at a different course than he won at last year, but McIntyre is a name that seems to be catching a lot of buzz. I see him at about 20% ownership. And we also have a current form from him that has 2 top 20s in a row. At the end of the day, you can't play. Like, we have 4 people drafting. We're not going to be able to take every single golfer $9,000 plus, but I would have thought that McIntyre would have been a name that would have been selected by somebody at this point.
I think it's a good one. McIntyre was one I was thinking about too. And before I make this point, audience, we're still waiting on you to lock in that pick. Zach, as captain, come through, lock one in. Who do you guys like to finalize if we don't hear in the next 30 seconds? We're going to go stick with Kiefer since he was the first name on the board. But going back to McIntyre, I came into this week wanting to play McIntyre. I thought he was going to be a good course fit. I actually thought his price was a little higher than I thought it should have been. Now, because I wanted to play, maybe the price was right, but I thought he was going to end up being kind of in the lower to mid 8K range. And at that point, he probably would have been one of my earlier picks. But now it's hard to kind of afford him if I'm going to go up to Ludwig and up to Connor. So you have to make some tough lineup decisions. But I agree with you in terms of a profile of a guy that can have a big week here. I think McIntyre makes a lot of sense. All right, David, locking in the pick. We appreciate you. Castillo, off the board. Interestingly enough, correct me if I'm wrong, Spence, I believe Castillo was drafted last week. Was he drafted by Team Audience? Or maybe it was 2 weeks ago. I might be confusing them.
I took Castillo, I want to say 2 weeks ago. He's a player that's inside of the top 20 of my model this week. Really likes him from a ball striking sense. And I'll throw this bet out on here. I don't know if it's still available at the price that I got it at, but I took Ricky Castillo minus 120 over Isaiah Salinda. That is a number that has been on the move since it's been given, but I think Castillo is one of the better values on the board. And I just want to throw this out very quickly before we move on further. If we look at Robert McIntyre, let me bring this up very quickly. I'm not saying that this is correct or incorrect, and you see it with ownership percentage, but he is a favorite at some sharp books against Taylor Pendrith. He is a pretty substantial favorite at some books against Sam Burns. He is a minus 150 option against Harry Hall. He's a minus 150 option against Olesen. The market is pushed heavily in his favor against a bunch of golfers that I like this weekend. That's only going to continue to help him in the profile of inside of my model as we keep pushing this forward.
Oh, all right. Well, there you have it. McIntyre endorsed, Castillo off the board. Some interesting plays, a lot of overlap. There's been a lot of steals tonight, so there's a lot of guys that were all on. Courtney, you got 2 here. You got McElroy. You picked some value plays with your last round. Where are you going with your next 2 picks?
I think I'm going to go another route with some value here. I think for my first pick, I'm going to go with Andrew Putnam at 7,000. So, I mean, he's made 3 straight cuts in a row. I feel like this course is very set up for him, very good setup for him as well. Potential top 20. And he's cheap enough, nice blend of, I think, high upside to make the weekend. So that's my first pick with Andrew Putnam. And then as my second pick, I'm going to go up the board here. I'm going to take Harry Hall at 9,200. His last 2 outings, tied for 6th at the Colonial, tied for 19th at the PGA Championship. Putter is his best weapon, and he's starting to get it going in all the areas. So those are my 2 picks. Andrew Putnam and Harry Hall.
Well, I will say Andrew Putnam is a steal. I thought I was going to get him here with my next pick off the board. I like Putnam here, a good value pick at only $7K. I really like that one. And Harry Hall's another one where, he was like, I think Harry Hall I had similar to McIntyre, where it's kind of like if I didn't start Ludwig and Connors, he would have been one of those upper price guys I would have looked to target here at 93-100. I think you get a lot of upside there also. I like this turn for you, Courtney. Audience, you're back on the clock. You need 2. So, Zach, we appreciate you back here engaging. Let's cook those nominations in because we're going to need to finalize that 5th pick. While we wait, let's go back to you here, Spencer. Are you interested in Andrew Putnam this week?
Value in my model in all iterations of how I built it. And then just to talk about Harry Hall quickly here, I think he might be the untapped potential guy in this range to where if you look at any of these golfers, 8,700 plus on the scale, he technically has the best contrarian leverage that you can find. My model has him at about 7 to 8%. That number has been varying each time that I update it. But like I said, if I view all of these $9,000 golfers in a very similar range, and I talked about once we get out of the $10,000 zone, all these $9,000 golfers are more or less kind of the same for me. If you can tell me that most of them are 22% in that range, and then you have Harry Hall at 7%, like for large field GPPs, that is a very unique way to start and to build out a lineup there.
Cool. All right. Pick endorsed. Andrew with, I think that's Hoygaard, right? As though he's nominated there. We're going to need that doubled or another pick in. Zach, I know you came late. A bunch of guys were already taken. So audience, step it up. Andrew, David K, Caitlin, Steve G. Let us know who you guys are thinking. You got 2 left, but you only got 1 here. You guys have plenty of money to spend. So you have some versatility in who you're going to who you can target with this pick. While we wait for that pick to get finalized, Courtney, I'd love to go back to you. I want to get your opinion on the audience draft thus far, and if you were on team audience, and you're not tonight, so it doesn't count, where would you be going with this pick?
That's a good pick. That's a good question. Because I like how they started with the Burns, as we talked earlier, and the Pendrith and Alex Smalley. Ricky Castillo at 7,200. Like I said, if he can get hot with his putter, I think that would be a nice value pick. And for that price, it's always good. Because the $6,000 range this week, I don't think is as strong as it has been before. So I can see the audience maybe moving up to get someone in that 8,500 to 9,000, because like I said, they have enough money to pick. So that's a good question. There's so many golfers off the board. Maybe like a Nick Taylor, they could go that route. I'm looking at Hogard would be a good pick for them too as well around this pick.
Well, Courtney, it might sound like the team audience needs you because they haven't finalized. And since Hojgaard was the first nomination, I think I'm going to lock that pick in. I will give team audience and Captain Zach Jeffers 10 seconds to change the pick if you guys want to go a different direction. But if not, we got to lock in Hojgaard as we got to keep this draft moving. Andrew, I know you'll be happy about that.
I'm just going to throw this out there if we don't get a nomination in a second. This has never been done in show history. I'm not saying that this is even a good idea. I think we let Courtney make the selection here for the audience.
Uh-oh.
Of the nominations that we've seen between Hojgaard, Kitayama, and Nicholas Norgard.
Ooh, I think I'm with the audience. I got to go with Hojgaard. I think I would pick Hojgaard at this point.
Well, it does look like the pick has been finalized.
Okay.
While we were talking. So, Spence, it was your decision to make that an option. So I'll let you make the final ruling.
I think we got two before this was officially done.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
Lock it in. Muller is off the board. Norgard, Muller, 7,500. The ownership looks reasonable. I think there's a guy who, definitely a risk. He could miss the cup. I think there's some upside potentially there. He's obviously really good at the driver. I think it's an interesting play. Spence, we'd love to get your take on Norgard, and then you're up with your fifth.
My model liked him a lot this week. I think you said it best, Joel. It's probably a little bit of a boomer bust selection to where the upside in my model is a lot better than the safety. And the only negative against it would be that he is starting to trend upwards in his ownership. But one of the things that I really like about him is if you look at his normal proximity numbers, he's a golfer who's 83rd in my model in expected proximity when you throw him on any given course. When you throw him specifically on this course of the way that I graded out the proximity ranges, he jumped all the way to 18th, and that's because he was a top 5 golfer in my sheet from 200 plus yards. And I talked at the beginning of the show to where your par 5s, you're going to have to score on those. Those are 200 plus yard shots. And then you also have 6 holes on the par 4s that are over 480 yards. Kind of has that exact blueprint that you want to see of the long iron play, the expected weighted driving. I think that there's a really big upside for him to win this golf tournament. I just don't know what the floor is, but at 7,500, that's kind of the exact profile that you want to take a chance on. And I understand why people are playing him. It makes a lot of sense. This is like the reverse of the answer that I sometimes give of where a guy gets chalky and I'm like, I think that this is a better cash game play. No, like this is one of those spots where this is a much better GPP play. You just have to know what you're signing up for the boomer bust nature.
Boom. All right. There you have it. Spence, you got your fifth here. Where are you going with your fifth pick?
I guess if you can call this golfer safe, I'm going to go a little bit safer than I've gone in some of these other picks. I'm going to take Mark Hubbard here at 7,400. Negative win equity in my sheet, kind of the opposite of what we were just talking about with Nicholas Norgard. But one of the better safety ratings that I had inside of my model. So I'm going to view this as a spot at 7,400. I'm going to hope that he can continue this form that he's put together, that has seen him put together 4 consecutive top 28 finishes. And just hope that this is something that he can continue, because if he can give me a 20th or better here at the price tag of 7,400, that's more than enough of what I need out of him. And if there is some world to where, if you look at the 2023 RBC Canadian Open, granted, not at this course, he did come in 6th place. So if he could trickle out something that's a little bit better there, then all of a sudden the upside of this lineup becomes better. But I wanted a little bit of safety of the volatility that I have on this build. And on top of that, it's going to definitely make it unique just because of his profile is definitely not something that the general public seems to be attacking this week. So if nothing else, you get a contrarian answer with Hubbard.
Boom. It's another steal. I thought I was going to get Hubbard here. That's where I was going to go. I think it's a good pick here this week. At the 7K range, low 7K range, he can get a hot putter. The ball striking has been good. I think, like Spencer said, I think he's safe. I agree. I think there's huge upside, but as your 4th or 5th guy, I think he's a good guy to kind of spot into your lineup. So Mark Hubbard off the board. I got 2 here. My first one I'm pretty solidified on. That's my more value play. That's Chandler Phillips. At only 6,800, I think, Chandler Phillips gives you some upside. We've seen him really strike the ball well this year, but he's really starting to find a hot putter. In his last 3 tournaments, he's gained 3.5 strokes, 2 strokes, and a half a stroke putting. I think he can carry that hot putter over, and he hits the ball well like he's been doing. I think he can get a good result there. I'll be honest, I'm torn my last pick, and since that's my last pick, I'll tell you who I'm torn between. I'm between Sam Ryder and Erik van Rooyen with this last pick. I think Erik van Rooyen's a little bit more upside. I think Ryder is probably on the safer side. I happen to just like Ryder more, as we know, because I draft him all the time. And we know, Ryder can carry that putter. And what I like about Ryder is he's not as good of a ball striker, but he gained last week. And if he gets a hot putter with that ball, with striking the ball well, he can do really well. I like Ryder. I'll play him this week, but I'm going to lock in my pick. I'm going to take Van Rooyen here. I just like what I've seen with Van Rooyen's upside more recently. Now, he's another boomer bust. He could miss the cut as well. But if you look at it more closely, he's really been playing well at these kind of one-off like tournaments. And he's losing strokes, especially on approach at these tougher tests, at these majors, the Players. He missed the cut. He missed the cut at the PGA. But he's made all the rest of the cuts since, the Mexico Open back in February. He's giving you a top 5 at the CJ Cup, a second, and he give you a top 10 at the Kensington Classic. What I'm really intrigued by is the putters coming around as well. He gained 2.5 strokes putting at the Charles Schwab. He gained a stroke putting at the PGA. If he finds that ball striking again this week, I think you can get a really good result here from Erik van Rooyen. All right. My squad is finalized. Spencer, you're back on the clock here. Before you go, were you interested in Phillips or Van Rooyen this week? And then who are you taking with your last pick?
Phillips is one of the 6 or 7 best values that I have in the $6,000 range. I have a very strong take, at least of who I would not have picked between Van Rooyen and Ryder. So if you go and you look at a Ryder matchup that's out there, I will give this one. I understand this helps nobody at this point. This was given very early on Monday in my Rotoballer Discord, but you will notice that there is a matchup. Let me get the exact price of what we're up to. So it was in the -120 range when I gave it. Doug Ghim over Sam Ryder. You will now see it's in the -160 zone. So we moved it about 40 points from where it was at. A lot of that is because I do like Doug Ghim for this tournament. I will say, though, that I am definitely lower than consensus on Sam Ryder. Now, as far as Erik van Rooyen is concerned, he qualified for the U.S. Open yesterday, and he did it in just spectacular fashion. I would say he probably was in one of the more difficult qualifying groups that you could have, and he shot 13 under par. I believe he beat like his next closest competitor by, I want to say 6 shots. I think Bud Cauley came second. And then there was the 5-man playoff. It's in that group where it was Homa and Fowler and Cameron Young who ended up getting themselves through. But Van Rooyen lapped the field in that. So he's definitely bringing form into it and confidence to know that he's going to be in the U.S. Open. For my final pick, for me, it comes down to 1 or 2 names. And maybe this is just because I cannot have a lineup. Like I can't feasibly do this to myself, of a lineup of Cameron Young, Alex Noren, Doug Ghim, and Keith Mitchell. Somebody's going to blow up at some point every single day, and I don't really want to deal with that. So I'm going to take Sungjae Im here. My model actually really likes Sungjae Im, and it's going to be a similar answer to what Courtney talked about with Harry Hall, to where 22% on Sam Burns, 22% on Taylor Pendrith, You have 19 plus on every other golfer there. And then you have Hall at 7 to 8% and Sungjae at 8 to 10%. Those are the two spots of leverage where you can actually get contrarian. So, I think after a really poor start for Sungjae to start this year, we've seen him turn it around recently. Miscut at the PGA Championship, but outside of that, I mean, he has been a top 35 machine just over and over again at a lot of these tournaments. And it turned around when he was able to put that 5th place together at the Masters. So, I think the general public is probably a little bit too low on Sungjae this week. And as I said at the beginning of the show, any of these $9,000 golfers work. I'm trying to find a way to fit one last one into this build. For me, this was the most affordable one that I could play. I mean, really, it's either him, Mitchell, or Clanton, which all of them are fine, but I will take the best win equity that I had in Sungjae M.
Boom. Sungjae M off the board. Sungjae M's a great last round pick. There's plenty of upsides out of Sungjae at 9,400. I'm certainly getting behind that pick, so I like that one there. Audience, pick is locked in, audience. Great job. Way to finish strong. Getting some more Canadian exposure to your lineup here in the last round. Nick Taylor off the board for team audience. I think this audience squad looks pretty strong, well balanced. Will you be able to retain the throne this week, or will you be dethroned? To be determined. But Courtney, with Nick Taylor off the clock, Sungjae M, would love to get your take on the last few picks, and then how you're going to round out your squad.
I really like that Sungjae M pick. And it's funny because, like Spencer said, Sungjae, he has turned it around, and it's not being talked about enough of how much he has turned around since the Masters. And you said top 35 or better over the last 6-7 tournaments. So I really like that Sungjae M pick. And like I said, with the audience getting Nick Taylor, good value right off the board at the end of this draft, 8,800. You couldn't get. I don't think you can get any better than that. So I like both the last two picks.
Boom. All right. Well, you got one. You got about 6,800 to spend. How you rounding out your squad?
As I talked about earlier, with the $6,000 range, I wasn't trying to get under here, but it just happened. So here I'm stuck with 6,000. But there's a couple of people that I really like. There was one I can't afford, but there is one that I do like. I'm gonna go with Mark Meisner at 6,800 to round off my Mac Meisner. Sorry, Mac Meisner to round up my draft here, and I really think that it's good value at 6,800 at the bottom of the draft. So I had to get a little creative. So I'm going with Mac Meisner as my last pick.
Yeah, I looked at him too when I was looking in that 6K range as who I was going to take as my value. If I didn't get a chance to take Phillips, I may have gone to him there. So it's a range. If I can avoid it, I want to. If you're going to take a flyer on one, like a Meisner, if Phillips, one of these guys, you can. But I think there's a ways that you can build where you don't have to dive too low this week, which I'm pretty excited about. That's a wrap for the draft. Guys, let us know who you think is going to take it down this week. We're going to track the standings, track the stats. We're going to crown a king and do it again next week. But before we let you go, do us a favor, smash the like button. Give us a follow. It goes a long way. Before we get out of here tonight, we will go to do our last segment, and that is, who are you surprised did not get drafted tonight? And we'll start with you, Courtney. And do you have a bet of the week?
Yeah, there is one golfer, as I was saying about, he was 6,900, Antoine Rosner, who I've been seeing a lot of, the podcast stuff they're talking about him. And I am surprised he didn't get picked. And golfer of the week. Ooh, that's a good question. Let's see. I really feel Harry Hall is going to be it's going to get in the top 5 this week. So that's my golfer of the week.
Boom. Harry Hall, top 5, bet of the week. I love it from Courtney. Courtney, we appreciate you coming on and drafting with us. You drafted a great squad. Anyone who follows Courtney, you get some great content, great information. Before we move on, Spence, we'd love to hear from you. One, anyone you're surprised did not get taken tonight? And do you have a bet of the week?
I like the Rosner shout out. That's somebody I have some season-long fantasy leagues where I picked up Rosner and I'm going to play him this week. inside of the top 20 of my model for safeties. So for a $6,900 golfer, definitely something to consider there. Mac Meisner's always a name that my model seems to like, just to go back to that very quickly. He is somebody, and I don't know why some sites put it. It's like, it always crashes my model because it comes out McClure Meisner. And maybe that's why he grades so well, is because I'm getting like half data points from Mac Meisner, who might be the good version of the McClure Meisner part of it. But he always grades well for me. And then I just want to throw this out there. I mean, any of those head-to-heads are gone. I mean, those are going to be the bets that I like the most this week. I have outrights on Sam Burns and Sung J M just to shoot the upside in those areas. But I am definitely a glutton for punishment. I saw Kurt Kitayama mentioned a million times that the audience kept wanting to go down that route. You probably will be happy when Thursday or Friday rolls around and he inevitably misses the cut. My model really liked him this week. I'm going to also go back down that road and get burnt by him one more time. And that's kind of the perfect player to fit into this lineup that I even have. It's kind of all those names that seem to burn everybody. But I thought Kitayama's price was too cheap for the upside that he did possess.
All right. Off the board, Kurt Kitayama. Well, not off the board, but surprised it didn't go off the board. One more name I want to throw in there. That's one I was surprised didn't go. I'm going to say Davis Riley. And then he's been playing well recently. You know, he's kind of pretty affordable. I thought there was some upside. So a little surprised Davis Riley didn't get drafted. But I think all four teams are really strong. I think it's going to be a really competitive week. I think it's going to be tough to take it down because I think this was a really strong draft. Good luck to everyone this week, and especially a huge thank you to Courtney Harden for coming on and drafting with us tonight. Special guest Courtney. He's usually one of the captains, one of the premier audience members each week drafting along with us. We're pleased to have you on the show, adding some really great insights and content on who you like this week. We can all have a better chance of making some money by getting your insights tonight. I wish everyone the best of luck. Before we get you out of here, Courtney, can you tell everyone where they can find you this week?
Yes, you can find me on social media, Courtney at 110979 on Twitter. Also, you can follow The Real Deal with Courtney Harden, which I do so many shows. It's usually Saturdays, but I do shows almost each and every other day. But you can follow that at Get The Real Deal on all social media platforms, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, BS3 Network. You can find it there as well, Roku channel. So yeah, Get The Real Deal with Courtney Harden every other day.
In case you don't already follow The Real Deal, it's a great show. Courtney does a great job leading it. I've been on it before. Spencer's been on it before. If you've seen it, you know it's great. If you haven't, check it out. You won't be disappointed. That's a wrap from me for tonight. Spence, did I forget anything?
I think you said it at the very beginning. I'm just going to double down on this. There were a lot of steals tonight on this show, and I've noticed historically that's usually a pretty good sign for the way that the lineups end up getting put together. We're in very unison with our thought process on this, and it just makes a very unique show. And it's something that we always talk about, Joel, to where you're going to get unique lineups any single time, because like all the names that kept getting thrown out by us, it would have been very easy to throw all of those names into one lineup, and that's going to be the most popular lineup. But what ends up happening is, like, look at my lineup. It forces me against Burns. I got to pivot to Sungjae. We could do that with all four lineups of how they were put together. I agree with you, though. I think it's going to be a very tough week to win. 4 quality lineups that were put together.
Boom. Well, don't forget, follow along. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. We're posting these lineups. Vote. Let us know who you think is going to win. Come back next week. Talk to us, Mac. We're crowning a king, and we're doing it all over again. Can the audience repeat and get on a hot streak? To be determined. Good luck this week, and we'll see you next week for the U.S. Open.